Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Roy Green. I'm the Dean of the UTS Business School. It's great to see such a turnout tonight, and very glad to have you with us at UTS. Tonight you will hear from three excellent speakers, followed by an interactive panel discussion featuring two additional UTS researchers, and of course there will be an opportunity for comment and discussion. Our speakers and panellists are all experts in key aspects of sustainable enterprise, the circular economy, and business innovation. Firstly, we will hear from Suzanne Ben. Sue is Professor of Sustainable Enterprise at the UTS Business School, leading multidisciplinary collaborations across the university and also with external partners to promote sustainability in business. Her research focuses on new approaches to sustainability management and organisational leadership. UTS Professor of Design Innovation, Sam Buccalow, follows Sue. Sam leads a team investigating the value of design-led innovation to Australia's economy. He has consulted widely to industry, spanning the medical devices, consumer products, telecommunications, automotive and mining services sectors. Sam is also convener of the Australian Design Integration Network and is an executive board member of the influential Cumulus Global Network. Our final speaker, Dr. Danielle Logue, joined UTS after completing a PhD and Master of Science at the University of Oxford's Said Business School. She has been a visiting scholar at Stanford and consulted to the World Bank. Her research now focuses on the spread of innovation, market creation strategy, and social entrepreneurship, and broad-scale processes of social change. So now it's over to our speakers, starting with Sue.
So good evening, everyone. I'd firstly like to acknowledge that I've developed this talk together with Tim Williams, who's just recently joined us in the business school. Tim is a specialist in corporate sustainability, so he certainly contributes enormously to our work in this area. So the focus of my talk is how business is being remade in light of sustainability challenges. And of course, there are many such challenges, and you no doubt will be familiar with things such as food security that Derek was talking about, of course, climate change. There are a number of other challenges, and one of the key works that's been done that's emphasised these points in recent years has been done through the Stockholm Resilience Institute, and they are headed up by the researcher there, Johan Rockström. And the work of these people, mainly earth scientists, has indicated that there's 9 planetary boundaries that must not be overstepped if humanity is to survive on Earth. And the sort of shock and horror of everyone reading this study is that the fact that we've already overstepped 3 of these boundaries. Not surprisingly, climate change is one, biodiversity is another, and the other one relates to the nitrogen cycle. Now, the point about this work too is that each of these boundaries are interlinked. So overstepping climate change barriers and thresholds, for instance, has implications for the other boundary areas. And of course, this morning I was reading in the Herald that scientists are saying now that the fires last year are undeniably due to climate change. That's just one example of how this is playing out. One of the other major studies that causing us to think that we really do need to reconceptualise the way our economic systems run is in the social area. And this was a major study that was done by 2 social epidemiologists working from the UK. And what their study found was that levels of inequality at a national level can be related to a series of health and social problems. So there's the US up there, Australia and New Zealand are down here, and they backed up this study by also looking at the same set of issues in relation to inequality, comparing different American states. So this book actually, they wrote it as an academic text, but in fact it's ended up as a bestseller with people from both sides of the political spectrum praising their findings. So it is a significant, yet another significant study indicating that we do need to rethink how business is operating and how our economic systems are working for us or not working for us. So it all sounds very dire, but I guess one of the points that we want to make in this talk is that there are reasons to be optimistic. We are seeing some green shoots, and what we're trying to do in the business faculty and across UTS is try to encourage those green shoots, trying to rethink business. Now, Dexter, who's in the audience somewhere, Dexter Dunphy and Andrew Griffiths and myself developed this phase model in 2002, 2003, so some of you may have already seen this phase model. But it shows developmental phases that businesses go through as they reach a more sustainable stage of their operations. Back in 2002, 2003, most of the organisations we looked at were moving beyond compliance to sort of the cost-saving approach to sustainability reflected in an efficiency phase, with very few reaching over into the strategic phase where they'd be trying to incorporate sustainability into their business model because of higher margins or perhaps opening new markets, etc. But very few indeed were over here at this phase that we call the restorative phase, the ideal organisation that was really contributing back into society and trying to restore some of the natural capital that we've lost. But what we're finding in our current work is that there's many more organisations actually now sitting in this strategic phase. Many of our well-known organisations are sitting there, whatever it is they produce or service or whatever. And increasingly, a number here in this ideal phase. And I'll be talking a little bit more about that as I go on through this talk. One of the classic organisations that we could say is in this ideal phase, and indeed has always been there, is Patagonia, because it was sort of developed around the need, around environmental need. And economic success sort of came as an accessory. And it has been an economic success. It was one of the first organisations to go into organic cotton, even though it lost money. It's now successful in most of its operations, and currently it's trying to make wetsuits out of cactus fibre or something, which sounds sort of a bit bizarre, but apparently that's been very successful as a material, and they're now trying to persuade their rivals to also use this material with the aim of making the whole thing cheaper. So we would classify that as a pretty good, sustaining, restorative organisation. But, I mean, I guess the point is, just looking at one organisation is not going to do the trick. We need to look at systemic changes because we're looking at systemic problems. And this is where we're interested in a whole batch of new theories that are emerging. Now, many of you will recognise that famous face over there. So I say this to students and they all put up their hand and say, yes, Michael Porter. So if not generations, certainly at least decades of business students have been influenced by his philosophies on how you do good strategy. Well, of recent times, he's become sort of famous again, sort of reborn in a way, through his publications in Harvard Business Review on this concept of shared value. That is, he is now arguing that business shouldn't just be about economic concerns alone, it should be about delivering social and environmental value. This is the concept of shared value. Now, it's been much criticised. like everything in academia, is always criticised. But, it's easy to say, well, there's a problem with his theory. The problem is that it's still economic primacy. It therefore doesn't deal with the ethical aspects of business. But I think there's something in what another famous figure in business academia says. This is Ed Freeman, sort of stakeholder management theorist. He argues that it is really important because Porter is saying that there's something wrong with the firm and that the firm needs to be reconceptualised. So we have that. And yes, there are pros and cons for shared value. But what is also happening is that there's a whole bunch of other theories coming out, other models for how business should be operating. And a number of these models, famous people in this area, Gunter Pauli from the Blue Economy, some of you may know him, the conscious capitalism theories from the guy who owns Whole Foods and his co-writer, Naomi Klein's got a new book out in this area. John Elkington, who coined the term triple bottom line, he too has come up with a new theory of capitalism, a new theory on how we should be operating our economic systems. So there's sort of a group of theories, and one of the things that I think is interesting is that they're cohering around this point of restoration, of the restorative business organisation, a business organisation that is giving back. So, yes, they're only theories, but there is some practice now emerging as well. Now, a very interesting area of practice that we're very involved with here at UTS, and particularly Damien Jerko from ISF is leading a big project we're working with, is the circular economy. So I sort of can't go into sort of great detail. We could ask Damien questions later if you like. But this is Dame Ellen MacArthur, and she's established a foundation in the UK that is getting a lot of traction with a number of very well-known organisations. Now, they're working towards what they call the circular economy, and that is an economy where business is about design and redesign, design for disassembly, say, design for products that can be used again and again and again and again. So we get rid of this sort of linear economy, and we end up with an economy where waste is eliminated. Now, obviously, that's a huge ask, but there's a lot of work being done in this area, and I think we're getting much closer to understanding how to make it work. So that's a practice that is actually happening. What else? Another interesting thing is the emergence of what we call the B Corps. Now, I don't know whether any of you have heard of this here, but it's now a movement in Australia with a number of Australian organisations classified as what we call B Corps. That is, organisations that are certified to a not-for-profit organisation as committed and delivering on positive social and environmental change. And a really interesting point is that in the US, a number of the states in the US have passed legislation which protects these organisations from lawsuits that might challenge them because they're not prioritising economic value. Because that's been a real bugbear in the States in terms of this sort of an issue. So these organisations exist. There's more than 1,000 now. There's started up in Australia, and Danielle knows a lot about this and can also answer questions on this. But what I'm trying to say is that we're thinking differently, and we're thinking differently here at UTS. We need to reflect these changes in our research. So we're moving away from looking just at the organisation, the individual organisation. We're trying to look at the more systemic level. We're trying to look for the new institutional and governance-based arrangements that can support these new organisations. We're looking, for instance, at sustainable supply networks and how they're credentialed now in terms of their social and environmental impacts. We're looking at investment impact, which Danielle is going to talk about, and how that is generating change. We're talking about circularity and product redesign, which Sam can tell us all about. We're realising innovation in a number of different ways. And I think really importantly, we're looking at now how the economy can work from owning stuff to sharing stuff, to having access to stuff rather than sharing stuff. And I'm sure many of you will be aware of the work of Rachel Botsman and the collaborative consumption movement. And Melissa Edwards, who works with us here at UTS, has been particularly working in that area. So that's how we're thinking differently in response to some of these challenges. I can't go through this in detail, but I just want to acknowledge the very specific and targeted role that our postdoctoral students are contributing into our work here. Like, they're really producing highly targeted and specific work which is helping us understand or complete this tapestry of what it means for a sustainable organisation. And these are just some of the areas that they're working in that I don't have time to go through now. In practice, what does this mean for how we're teaching? What it means is that we need to produce leaders who can deal with this complexity. And there's many studies now which show that, in fact, CEOs and senior managers might understand the importance of sustainability, but they really don't know how to deal with it. And so we're trying to develop with our graduates an understanding of what sustainability means in terms of applying it in organisations. And we're looking at introducing sustainability into all of our Bachelor of Business courses. We're also working in a number of cross-boundary transdisciplinary courses across the university, because that's what students are going to be faced with when they go out to be a manager in an organisation. They've got to listen to an accountant in one ear and an engineer in another ear, because both of those people are talking about issues such as energy. So this is it's very important to get this boundary spanning capability in our graduates. So in practice, we have to decide at which level we're going to work at. It's a really contextual issue, sustainability, and it's multi-scalar. So we need to work at the local precinct. We've been working with Green Capital and the local precinct here in Ultimo. We need to work at the massive scale of the global supply networks. And Sarah Kane has strong interest in the human aspects, the human rights aspects of the global supply chain, because that's another level we need to reach. So it's a massive task, but I think here at UTS we've got those cross-disciplinary capabilities that we can address these really pressing issues and see where and how business can be remade. A new conversation needs to be developed. We've got to get long-term thinking skills. We've got to work out how to introduce long-termism back into business. I could just point you in a direction of the recent edition of our book with Dexter and Andrew, which starts on that conversation again. I also like to point you to the website that we've been running here on behalf of the Australian government, which is trying to get together this conversation around teaching and learning sustainability. So if you're interested, you could have a look at either of those. And so thank you very much. Thank you.